Friends, we have a message from Betway, the sports betting app that backs you to trust your hockey instincts. If you consider yourself an NHL expert, this is the app for you. If you think you know who's going to win games between the Senators and the Maple Leafs and the Canadiens and the Jets and the Flames and the Oilers and the Canucks, I know I'm mentioning all of the Canadian teams. If that sounds like you should check out the You Lead, You Win offer from Betway. Betway will pay you out as a winner if a team leads 2-0 in any match involving a Canadian team with a $20 max stake. So head on over to Betway and bet your way. Must be 19 years or older to play, and please, always play responsibly. So let's at least try to make sense of what's out there. And I know our good buddy Pierre LeBrun kind of reported on some things that could be discussed. And one thing that already was discussed before the weekend, and in hindsight, I'm kind of glad we didn't discuss it on the Thursday show when we were still kind of getting over the post-deadline funnies, the ridic stuff. The idea that the NHL salary cap being extended into the playoffs could be in play. Pierre LeBrun, among other things, saying that is something that could be discussed amongst GMs today and tomorrow. We know about how teams like Vegas and Chicago in the past and Tampa, Vegas might have to do that this year, but Chicago and Tampa Bay have used LTIR as a way to obviously just kind of exceed the cap and eventually get to a point where they could let players who are on LTIR be available to them in time for the postseason. I'd like to know your thoughts on the idea that the salary cap, they're trying to imagine a world where it would work in the playoffs. Like, that's just kind of a weird thing I'm not necessarily used to. And I get we're only a couple years into the salary cap era, and this part of it being a part of the game.
Well, first of all, don't let this suit fool you. We're not completely over the post-trade deadline sillies because, I still don't have my brain power back at where I would like it to be. Like, I don't know why. Okay. I still just feel like a little spacey. So anything could still come out of my mouth. Ridic might make another appearance on this
Over
podcast.
Under how many Ridics on this show?
Well, I don't even normally say that. I don't even know why I said it once. And then the way you reacted to it, and then it's taken on a life of its own. So,
it just came out of nowhere. All of a sudden, you just made up the word Ridic like he's just some teenager.
So now I feel like I need to drop that Easter egg every once in a while in there for like the real ones,
Yeah.
So yeah, Ridic ain't being retired, and Goofy ain't being retired yet either.
No.
But anyway, onto the salary cap. I think this is what's interesting about this particular discussion is it's being driven by a handful of GMs. So, sometimes what gets discussed at these meetings, it comes sort of from the league down. And I think, for example, if we get into the Evgeny Dadonov trade and the reversal and how those no trade clauses all work, like that's probably more of a league down initiative because they're trying to correct, something that happened once and prevent it from happening in the future where they've had to reverse a trade. Whereas this is GM's thinking that this is unfair or that it's not right that some teams have been able to basically ice playoff rosters that are $8 or $9 million above what the salary cap was in the regular season. And so I can't really predict where it's going to go because it's coming from the bottom up. And I suppose if they build a compelling enough argument or build enough consensus, potentially we could see a tweak or change. I don't know if that's necessarily likely at this meeting. I mean, I think sometimes it's a rather complex issue. And I think sometimes it has to be considered over a period of time before you actually see some kind of change to the system. But this could be a start of that, right? Just because it doesn't happen Tuesday where they come out and say, okay, we're making this change, doesn't mean it dies here either. And, fundamentally the problem is, so I think one of the ideas that will be discussed is, okay, you can carry a roster in the playoffs of any amount, but the 20 players you put in uniform would have to be cap compliant based on what their hits were in the season. So you can't really benefit in the way that you have in the past. But, that's loaded with problems because let's just say for the interest of this discussion, we take the Tampa situation where Kucherov makes $9 million and plus. So his salary didn't count against Tampa's cap essentially last year. Mm-hmm. You add him in the playoffs. So then what are they supposed to do? Like sit out a $5 million player to stay under that limit? Like it's not necessarily fair to the players either, right? Like the players might have grievances with this. And so remember too, this is a CBA matter, so the league can't just change it. I mean, the NHLPA would have to sign off on it too. And I'm not saying the NHLPA, there's nothing really in front of them yet. So I'm just anticipating where, issues they might raise. These aren't necessarily issues that they have done so already. And the other one is you could maybe have injuries or a series of events happen where you can't ice a full team in the playoffs. And, that happens obviously time to time. We've seen it in the regular season. Vegas had it a lot last year. And it, it hurts their ability in those games, but I don't know you really want to see that when it come playoff time. I think that's not great. And there's probably about 100 other things that I haven't even considered that make this difficult. And so I think it's unlikely to change here just based on my sense of things. But again, this is an organic conversation being had among some of the most powerful people in the game at an important meeting. And so I think it's going to be interesting, just, I guess, for me, talking to the guys as they come out of the room about how they thought that discussion went, if it still has more legs, if there's maybe a few things suggested that have changed some minds. I mean, that I think we'll be gauging that more than looking for a specific change that happens in these 2 days.
Do we have a sense of which GMs in particular are actively pushing for this? Like, I've heard up to about 10 GMs in this league, almost a third of this league could be like asking for this.
I'm not fully sure the list at this point. Like, I know some of them, and some of them don't want to be publicly revealed until I think this discussion has happened. And so, I'm always honest with this pod. I don't hold back, but in this very specific circumstance, I'm going to see how they package it and come out. Because the other thing too is I definitely don't know the full list. I don't know everybody who feels this way. I don't know that it's fair to name the one or two that I know plan to push this discussion, because there's probably 7 others that have their back on it. And so the short answer is I don't have a full picture of that, but I think it's not going to be a big giant secret after the discussion happens. I think that they didn't want to have it shot down before they even had a chance to have the discussion. And so, that's all I can really say on that.
That's fine. I think just for the salary cap, because of the limits that have been put on teams as a result of it, there's already so many, like the LTIR thing is already a loophole GMs have to push through in order to make this work. Like, why add this thing in the playoffs? I guess fine to maybe limit other teams, but for all those other ones who are in a situation like a Tampa or a Vegas right now, like, why punish them further for, trying to play under the rules and finding a loophole that works? Like, I'm just a bystander here, but I'm not really in favor of that idea working out. But that's just me speaking of my own opinion.
Well, it's kind of my view, because I think what we have to actually acknowledge here, because I think it gets lost a little bit in the fan conversation on this topic. It's not like this happens all the time, and like a lot of things have to come together for it even to be possible. Like, first of all, players have to be injured. Like, these aren't invented injuries. I think maybe where the spirit of it could be challenged is you could argue, could Nikita Kucherov have played one regular season game before the playoffs? But obviously the reason I bring that up is because he couldn't play that one regular season game because they wouldn't have been able to activate him and be cap compliant to do it. But,
right.
He did have hip surgery. There's a very specific timeline. I think it's 4 months for hip surgery. Like, that's common. Other players have had this, and he was out about that time. So, and so it definitely benefited them to get that player back. But the other thing is it's not very few players could miss an entire season and be great in the playoffs like Kucherov was. Like it wasn't a foregone conclusion that would all work in their favor. And so I think sometimes you have to step back and be like, all right, we're really talking about a few isolated cases. Obviously, lots of teams right now are operating in long-term injured reserve. I think 16, I looked yesterday and counted on Cap Friendly. But, I do think that this isn't like being widely abused or something. So I'm with you. That's ultimately why I'm not sure, unless there's some tweak that's maybe smaller that I'm just missing here. I don't know that you have to overhaul the whole system for these few isolated cases.
You mentioned Evgeny Dadonov earlier. It seems as if one thing that could come up in discussions is the idea or the way no trade lists have been documented or compiled. Of course, Dadonov, we spoke about his situation on the last few podcasts that we've done, and he's turned himself into an indispensable player for the organization since.